Hi everyone, I'm Lovely, Disney bouncing as Dinah, Alice's cat from Lewis Carroll's Alice books. So for today, our group will be discussing about one of the most known writers in children's literature, Lewis Carroll, focusing on his books, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and its sequel, Through the Looking Glass. So without further ado, let's start.
Good day, everyone. I'm Krishna J. Saladaga, and Lovely and I will be the one who will discuss to you the author's background of the two literary works that we will be tackling today. So, let's have first his early life. Lewis Carroll, who is the author of the two stories, is a pseudonym of the author Charles Ludwig Dodgson. He was born on January 27, 1832 in Thursbury, Cheshire, England. He had 10 siblings. He was the eldest son and third child of Reverend Charles Dodgson and Frances J. Ludwig. Lewis Carroll was a very imaginative who was exceptionally skilled in mathematics. He wrote magazines containing poems, stories, and drawings at a young age to entertain his brothers and sisters. He studied at Oxford University, Christchurch, and received a degree in mathematics. He was a very conservative and orderly person who was socially awkward around people and only felt comfortable around young girls. So his heart is close to young girls. Lewis Carroll especially adored the young Alice Liddell, one of the daughters of the Dean of Students Henry Liddell, where he taught.
One thing that usually pops out in Carroll's writing is its quirky, distinctive style. From humorous wordplay to making the illogical logical, Carroll's style is what makes his book so eye-catching. His writing and his actions actually changed the world, wherein he went from being ridiculed to being an inspiration to a lot of people. One of the more interesting things Carroll does in his writing is frequently using italics for emphasis, which has been highly effective. It makes words stand out in a superb manner and puts emphasis in the correct places. Carroll additionally employs a unique use of parentheses and capital letters. This, just like using italics, provides a childish experience of his books. This style makes the story exude power and makes the method of reading exciting. Lewis Carroll's mathematical history and logical disposition, interest in and photography of little girls, strange eating habits, and many other factors influence his writing. He integrates his experiences in his works, which makes them personal and easily relatable to some, if not to many. For more details on the other factors that influenced his style of writing, please refer to the provided handouts.
So, as you can see on our PowerPoint presentation and on our written report, we have provided a list on the body of works of Lewis Carroll from his literary works, which includes the Alice Adventure in Wonderland, Miss Jones, The Hunting of the Shark, and many other literary works by Lewis Carroll, down to his mathematical works, because he's also an ace when it comes to mathematics. We have there Syllabus of Plain Algebraic Geometry, Symbolic Logic from Part 1 to Part 2, Alphabet Cipher, and many more. So, Lewis Carroll was not just good in literature but also in mathematics. That's what makes him exceptional.
Charles Ludwig Dodgson, although mainly a mathematician, was also notable in other fields such as in photography and literature. The Alice books are frequently stated to be significant because if you read them, you'll observe they may be full of complex, apparently mature concept approaches and reasoning. Many professionals assume that Lewis Carroll did this purposely to demonstrate that kids are capable of having complex thoughts and reasoning as well, occasionally even greater so than adults. Regardless of his supposed audience, his hidden meanings, or any of the other many motives his works are considered significant, Lewis Carroll became a talented individual and storyteller who managed to contribute stories and poetry which have been cherished and read by adults and children for many years.
Good day, everyone. At this juncture, we are going to talk about the background of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Alice Adventures in Wonderland is a fictional fantasy novel and one of the best examples of literary nonsense genre. It is written by Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, also known with his pen name Lewis Carroll. Carroll's 10-year-old close family friend Alice Pleasance Lydell influenced him to write the novel. How did it happen? Carroll often told stories to Alice and her sisters while on one of their boat trips from Oxford to Godstow. Alice begged for a story with lots of nonsense in it, and so Carroll obliged. It happened that Alice was enraptured by the whimsical story of Carroll that she begged him to write it down for her. He was hesitant at first but then eventually caved in to Alice's pleadings. It was November 26, 1864 when he gave Alice the completed manuscript, which was in the form of a little booklet as a Christmas present. The novel was originally titled Alice Adventures Underground, which then eventually changed to Alice Adventures in Wonderland for a reason that it may appear to be a book containing instructions about mines. Now, who urged Carroll to publish the novel? It was Henry Kingsley and George MacDonald's children, specifically his 6-year-old son Gribble, who wished there were 60,000 copies of it, which prompted Carroll to publish and fund the whole project. The novel's recalled first edition was printed on July 4, 1865. The approved first edition was published on November 18, 1865, but dated 1866 with the publisher Macmillan, which was being published in Oxford. It was translated in more than 174 languages so far, including Korean, Japanese, Egyptian, and Arabic. The novel's copyright in the United Kingdom expired in 1907. Now let's talk about the illustrator. Here's how it happened. Dodgson enjoyed drawing and intended to use his own drawings in the published edition, but then he ultimately realized that his skills were not in the realm of draughtsmanship. So on January 25, 1864, he approached Sir John Tenniel to draw his illustrations. The book was in a bright red color with the edges evenly cut smooth and no gilding. After the Bible, the Quran, and the Shakespeare, Alice Adventures in Wonderland is the world's most frequently quoted and best-known work.
And now, let us get to know some of the major characters in Alice. If you want to get to know the minor characters, you can also refer to our written report. So the first character that we have here is Alice. She is the 7-year-old protagonist of the story, and for those who have seen the film and for those who have read the book, we can understand that Alice has an established sense of self and she has a fixed understanding of the world. That is why when she entered Wonderland, all her image of herself is somewhat destroyed and she is getting curiouser and curiouser as she enters Wonderland. The next major character that we have here is the Queen of Hearts. So the Queen of Hearts is the ruler of Wonderland instead of the king. Of course, because she outpowers the king. She is an image of madness and rudeness and cruelty, as she also consistently shouts that her subjects be beheaded because of small reasons. And sometimes the queen symbolizes adults, because sometimes adults give out nonsensical commands and punishments to children. So the next one that we have is the Duchess. Now the Duchess is the queen's ugly cousin and the milder version of the queen. At first, she is rude to Alice as she tosses out the baby to Alice, which then turns into a pig. And then on their second meeting, the Duchess tries to be good to Alice by giving out morals to everything that she is saying, although nothing really makes sense. I really love this quote from the Duchess. If everybody minded their own business, the world would go round a deal faster than it does. Next, let us go to our next major character, which is the Cheshire Cat. The Cheshire Cat is among the unique characters in Wonderland. It is always grinning, which I think implies that it is not threatened by anyone else. Also, the Cheshire Cat displays logic as it explains to Alice that the Wonderland is driven by madness. And the next one that we have is the Mad Hatter. Now, the Mad Hatter is a very loved character from the film adaptation as he symbolizes friendship and companionship. He helps Alice through all of her adventures and journeys in Wonderland. However, in the book, they're not really that close, they're not friends, and the Mad Hatter in the book loves annoying Alice, and that can be seen when the Mad Hatter gives out personal comments about Alice's hair. And now I also included one minor character because this character somehow symbolizes all of us. This is Alice's sister. This is the only character whom Alice interacts with outside of Wonderland. And at the end of the book, Alice told her sister about her dream. Then Alice went off. But then Alice's sister just sat there and for a moment imagined herself to be in Wonderland. And she symbolizes adults that have grown too fast as she appreciates and acknowledges Alice's description of Wonderland and imagines it as her world for a moment. Because sometimes us adults want to escape reality and enter Wonderland. And I think that is it. Those are all the major characters and one minor character that we will be discussing today. Thank you.
First of all, let's sort this out. What you're about to hear are only the highlights from each chapters. Thus, you are advised to read our written report. Hi, I am Robert, and today I am your king, but not the King of Hearts, and welcome to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It begins with Alice sitting alongside a riverbank with her sister. Alice's sister is reading a pictureless book, which bores Alice. Then, she sees a white rabbit run right past her. After that, he jumps down a rabbit hole. This mysterious event intrigues Alice and she runs after him. She jumps down the rabbit hole herself and is falling for quite a while. When she lands, she's in a mysterious hall. She chases after the white rabbit but loses sight of him. She finds a tiny golden key on a table. At first, she thinks it might go to the door, but the key is way too small to fit the door's locks. She looks through the keyhole and sees a magnificent garden. Then, she finds a little bottle that has "Drink Me" written on it. She does so, and shrinks to only 10 inches tall. Alice wants to get into the garden but realizes she forgot the key on the table. Next, she finds a small cake with the words "Eat Me" written on it. After a while, she begins growing until her head smacks the roof. This causes her to start crying gallons of tears, given her size. The white rabbit comes back with a pair of white gloves and a large fan. To her surprise, she has begun shrinking again and is now 2 feet tall. She shrinks further and slips into a saltwater sea of her tears. Alice finds a mouse in the sea, but offends it after she talks about how her cat could eat him. Even more animals fall into the sea, yet they all make it to the dry ground. They all want to get dry, so the animal suggests a caucus race. The rules are that they all run in a circle and everyone is a winner. The dodo bird wants to give out prizes, so they ask Alice what she has in her pocket. All she has are little pieces of candy and a thimble. The animals take the candy and Alice gets her thimble back as a prize. Then everyone goes their separate ways after Alice mentions her cat. The white rabbit looks for the white gloves and the fan that he lost. When he sees Alice, he mistakes her for his maid. He commands her to run back to his house and fetch him a new set of gloves and a fan for the Duchess. She runs to his house and gets the items, but then gets distracted by a vial with no label. She drinks it and starts to grow, which makes it impossible to escape the house. The rabbit comes to his house and tries to get Alice out. A crowd has grown and then throw pebbles at the window and some hit her. The pebbles turn into the little cakes which she eats and finally shrinks. She runs into the woods to figure out her next moves. Unfortunately, she runs into a puppy that is much larger than she is. She runs away and finds a caterpillar sitting atop a mushroom smoking a hookah. Alice tells the caterpillar about how she wishes she was her normal size. Then the caterpillar packs up and goes to live. On his way out, he tells Alice that one side of the mushroom will make her taller and the other side will make her smaller. A pigeon flies over and accuses her of being a serpent, which she denies. Finally, Alice regains her normal size. Then she sees a fish footman run out of the woods. He has brought her an invitation to play croquet with the queen. Alice goes to the queen's house and walks in. Everyone was sneezing from all the pepper in the soup, which Alice noted. Then she spots the Cheshire cat with his constant grin. The Duchess hands her baby to Alice and leaves to go get ready to play croquet with the queen. Then the baby turns into a pig. Alice asks the Cheshire cat for directions. He tells her where the Mad Hatter and the March Hare live. Then he vanishes. His grin remains behind even after his body has left. Alice goes to the March Hare's house and joins their tea party where it's always 6 p.m. It has always been this way since the Mad Hatter sang at Queen of Hearts concert. She became enraged and yelled, "He's murdering the time! Off with his head!" This is one of Queen's most famous lines and is never actually done. Later, Alice leaves the tea party angry at the Mad Hatter's rudeness. Then, Alice comes to the Queen's garden. She sees the Queen gardeners painting with white roses with red paint. She heads in to play croquet and finds a strange scene. The players use flamingos for mallets, hedgehogs for bowls, and soldiers stacked up for the goals. The Queen gets mad at the Cheshire cat and orders his head cut off, but since his mind is so big, it makes it impossible. Then the Queen invites Alice to see the mock turtle. To get there, Alice rides a griffin. The mock turtle tells her about how he used to be a real turtle. Then Alice is shown the lobster squadron, which is a bizarre dance where they throw a lobster into the sea. Alice arrives at a courthouse where the Knave of Hearts is being tried. His crime is stealing the Queen's darts. Alice tips over the jury box and the king declares the trial can continue until all jurors are returned. The Queen demands a verdict from Alice. When she refuses, the playing cards rush at her. Then Alice hears her sister say, "Wake up, Alice dear." Why? What a long sleep you've had. And that's the end of our plot summary and analysis.
And now let us move on to the analysis of significant symbols and images. The symbolic resonances of Alice's adventure in Wonderland objects are generally contained to the individual episode in which they appear. Often the symbols work together to convey a particular meaning. First, we have the garden. It was described as the loveliest garden that has beds of bright flowers and cool fountains. The garden may symbolize the Garden of Eden, which is an idyllic space of beauty and innocence that Alice is not permitted to access. On a more abstract level, it may simply represent the experience of desire in that Alice focuses her energy and emotion on trying to attain it. These two symbolic meanings work together to underscore Alice's desire to hold onto her feelings of childlike innocence that she must relinquish as she matures. Next, the white rabbit. There is this line of the rabbit which says, "Oh my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting." By stating how late it's getting, the rabbit is actually noticing how old Alice is growing. Since the rabbit is once again speeding along, it insinuates that Alice doesn't have much time left before she grows into an adult. The white rabbit also symbolizes the spark of curiosity that activates Alice's spiritual awakening. Next is the rabbit hole. When Alice follows the white rabbit with burning curiosity, this is a symbol for leaving the rational structures of the real world and entering a wilder and more fantastical realm. This is also a symbol for Alice's imagination because from the moment we see Alice falling down into the hole, it represents
a passage into less than realistic realm. The caucus animals. These symbolize adult life. There is this race which is called the caucus race for the animals in order to draw themselves, but this makes no sense to Alice. This represents that Alice struggled to make sense of adults' actions and logic. Next is the blue caterpillar and its mushroom. Both the caterpillar's slender body and the mushroom that it sits upon have a phallic structure. This emphasizes the theme of a sexual threat. Cheshire Cat. The Cheshire Cat represents the guidance that Alice receives during her adolescence. The cat acts as a role model to Alice, offering her the advice that helps her to understand Wonderland. Once the Cheshire Cat informs Alice that everyone in Wonderland is mad, Alice begins to grasp the concept of Wonderland and the strange things that she has encountered. Next, we have the Mad Hatter and March Hare. These help exemplify the frustration that Alice feels as her intelligence is challenged as she ages. Both characters challenge Alice's intelligence with riddles as statements that cause Alice to question what she really knows. This resembles how an adolescent feels after they enter the adult world. Next, we have Queen of Hearts. She is a singular face of fear and is symbolic of the Victorian expectations of women. Under Victorian times, women were expected to marry by 25, restrain their emotion, and accept their duties as housekeepers. Alice is initially frightened by the Queen's overbearing presence or the expectations in Wonderland, which is her life. The Duchess. The Duchess' symbolism is fairly straightforward. She represents the life lessons or morals that Alice will learn as she ages. The morals sound absurd and pointless to Alice, but that is because she is a child. But as she continues to grow, she will be able to make sense out of the events. Last, the Mock Turtle and the Griffon. Both animals are the only characters in the book that Alice feels that she can relate to. They represent the friends and support in Alice's life as she matures. Now we have significant images. Let us take a look on the passage which contains the images like visual, auditory, tactile, gustatory. For example, however, on the second time around, she came upon a low curtain she had not noticed before, and it was little door about 15 inches high. She tried the golden key and locks, and to her great delight it fitted. So we have here the example of sense of sight. Carroll emphasized the image through the use of setting and exaggerations of certain events to describe how Alice feels. For example, when Alice was having options in a room, she did things in wrong order of events. This will help us readers to understand, especially in a fictive world.
The first theme would be identity. While in Wonderland, Alice comes to wonder if she has become a different child completely. She then puzzles over the meaning of I. Her identity changes with each new scene and collection of characters, each questioning her and her authority, just as she herself does. For example, the first thing the caterpillar says to Alice is, "Who are you?" And she tries to find the consistent answer to this question the whole way through the story. Just as in life, the prospect of becoming something different is threatening her and her sense of self and her vision about everything around her. Next is growing up. The question why Alice is so confused about her identity has to do with her developing sense of the difference between childhood and adulthood. Alice's experiences in Wonderland can be taken as a kind of exaggerated metaphor for the experience of growing up, both in terms of physically growing up and coming to understand the world of adults and how that world differs from a child's expectation of it. Alice's anxiety about growing up and about the wide world beyond her comforts can be seen in her constant evaluation of her size and worth. Her preoccupation with growing and shrinking and finding the right size for what she needs to do evokes how disorienting of the idea of growing up can be. Next is absurdity. Alice's logical, reasoned behavior is in contrast with that of the inhabitants of Wonderland. In the chapter A Mad Tea Party, the Hatter asks a riddle. Why is a raven like a writing desk? When Alice gives up trying to figure out why, the Hatter admits he doesn't know. Alice chides him that he shouldn't waste time asking riddles that have no answers. This and everything about Wonderland is absurd by Alice's standards. And lastly, curiosity. Curiosity is the vehicle which, in many cases, propels the story forward. The very example of this is when Alice follows the White Rabbit because she is burning with curiosity. So in each case, Alice's curiosity leads her to the next scene in Wonderland. A central message of the story is that of identity. From Alice's adventures in Wonderland, we can realize that sometimes we have to fall down a rabbit hole to get to where we need to be and to find ourselves. This means that wandering doesn't always mean we're lost, because when we wander, we get to meet different people and realize that we are all mad. Mad in a way that everyone is unique. Once we are able to see outside of sociological conformity, we are able to consider beyond what people tell us is strictly the right or wrong way to believe and or think.
Now let's have the background of the novel Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there. This novel was written by Lewis Carroll, the pen name of Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, with its illustrator Sir John Tyndall. This was published by Macmillan in December 1871 but dated 1872 on the title page. It was published in Oxford and was translated into 65 languages. In the 6 years since Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland, he had been teaching Alice and her sisters the game of chess. He made up stories to illustrate the moves of the pieces and the rules of the game. In the article Alice on the Stage, Carroll remarked, "Through the Looking Glass was made up almost wholly of bits and scraps, single ideas that came of themselves." He tied all those individual ideas together into a single story with the use of two main themes, chess and mirror images. The mirror way round idea dominates the book because this kind of game was a favorite of Carroll's. He liked to write letters in mirror writing, drew pictures which changed into different ones when held upside down, and he also liked to play musical boxes backwards. Carroll's Through the Looking Glass is often seen by scholars as the less successful novel than its more celebrated companion piece, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Critics have interpreted Looking Glass as the more controlled and less spontaneous of the two works, more the product of Dodgson, the mathematical logician and Oxford lecturer, than Carroll, the storyteller. Through the Looking Glass is nevertheless recognized for its keen understanding of Alice's predicament, most notably in her discovery that being a queen offers neither the security of attachment nor the sovereignty of freedom, to which she refers to her opening words to the White Knight. "I don't want to be anybody's prisoner. I want to be a queen." David L. Russell notes that Carroll's Two Alice story marked the apotheosis of what many critics consider the golden age of fantasy writing in English, abandoning all the rules of writing for children. Russell concludes that both novels completely broke the bonds of didacticism and have rightfully become a part of childhood mythology.
So now we will be talking about our major characters. So first we have Alice, a 7-year-old girl who happens to be our main character. So her expansive imagination leads her to a dream on one November day wherein she climbs through a looking glass house which has a world beyond and wherein a giant chess game is taking place. Humpty Dumpty is contemptuous, self-important, and imperious. However, he helps Alice in a way that he agrees to decode the first verse of the poem Jabberwocky. This is also an opportunity for him to lord his knowledge and expertise over Alice. So the White Queen, according to Alice, is immensely baffling and not so queen-like. Alice helps to put the queen right, however, it did not make any difference. The White Queen is the one who introduces to Alice the properties of the Looking Glass world as well as the reversal of time and the significance of believing in the impossible. The Red Queen. So at first, Alice looks up to the Red Queen and even tries her best to abide all of her laws with regards to conduct and etiquette. She's the first to confirm to Alice that things are opposite in the Looking Glass world than what they are in Alice's world. The White King wants to be helpful, so he sends all of his men and horses to save Humpty Dumpty when he falls off the wall. Despite being a king, he seems uncomfortable with his role, as though he is not very powerful. Thus, the lion and the unicorn successfully intimidated him without much effort. The White Knight rescues Alice from the Red Knight and leads her to the final square. He constantly falls off his horse like all other knights, though he assures Alice that he is a skilled rider. He is also an inventor and creates all sorts of things. However, his inventions are way too difficult and overwhelmingly unsuccessful than what they are trying to solve or replace. Tweedledum and Tweedledee, a pair of identical short fat men who are just as schoolboys. Tweedledum is quick to anger and becomes incensed when he discovers that Tweedledee broke his favorite new rattle, while Tweedledee is a bit of a coward and he is not interested in fighting over Tweedledum with the broken rattle. The unicorn, an imperious unicorn in the sixth square who fights with the lion for the White King's crown. When he first meets Alice, he is disgusted as he thought that children were just fabulous monsters, but he finds her intriguing after their introduction. Hatta is one of the White King's messenger, and the first time Alice meets Hatta, he just recently got out of jail and is still sad about it, and he also happens to be an incarnation of the Mad Hatter from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Heya is also one of the White King's messenger, and according to the White King, Heya is an Anglo-Saxon messenger, which therefore shows the attitudes of an Anglo-Saxon. The illustrations and endnotes in the book reveal that Heya is an incarnation of March Hare from Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. The fawn is the companion of Alice when she travels through the woods, wherein travelers forget everything, including all nouns and their names. So when the fawn and Alice get through the other side of the forest, the fawn eventually remembers who it is and that it should fear humans like Alice. So he runs away, which makes Alice sad. So lastly, we have the ship. The ship is an old shopkeeper and is very rude and cranky to Alice. So in the story, she continues to knit and shouts rowing terms as Alice rows along the river, and she meanly laughs at Alice when Alice doesn't understand the rowing terms.
So now I'll be discussing the plot analysis for Alice Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. So at the very beginning of the literary work, it is apparent how Lewis Carroll actually blurs the boundaries between reality to the idea of being asleep, making it difficult for us readers to actually tell or determine which parts of the work is actually the product of reality or the product of imagination otherwise. In the very first chapter, Alice plays with her kitten and falls asleep and slips into the Looking Glass world, and the events in this work are actually different from that of the first one, which is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where she has less control over her imagination. The inversion motive of reality also in this literary work is quite evident. Inversion motive in a sense that inanimate objects in the real world take on animate capabilities or abilities, where, for example, flowers are able to talk, or the chess pieces, which were unable to talk or move in reality, were able to do that in this work. She is an explorer and explores around in the house, goes outside towards the garden and meets the queen. So here she begins to understand that everything is backwards, in a sense that when she talked with the flowers and was able to get information that the Red Queen was actually there and that she has some similarities with her, she talked to the rose, actually a flower there, told her that in order to meet the queen she has to go backwards, but she didn't follow that until she had problems and realized therefore to follow that instruction, and in that way she met the queen. So she understands that she has lesser control here in the second and third chapter. She has lesser control in her imagination and is just moving about on and on. So in chapters 4 to 6, she meets the twins Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and who are mirror images of each other actually, and has an encounter with the Red King, whom the twins actually told her not to wake up because they said no, that if she wakes him up, or if they wake him up, Alice would cease to exist, as she is a product of his imagination. And so Alice that time was really scared and confused, and she actually cried. So she runs away after that encounter with the twins and meets the White Queen, who actually offers to hire her, which she of course declined, and goes on with their life. She then buys an egg, which turned into Humpty Dumpty, who was actually had his own philosophy and is quite smart, but always criticizes her for her name not having a connotation or deeper meaning, her name being just Alice and not having any definite or important meaning behind it. In chapter 6, Humpty Dumpty insults Alice for, again, the name that she has, not knowing that Alice is still young and she doesn't really have a lot of knowledge about all those things. So in chapters 8 to 9, Alice meets the White King and goes on an adventure with him, does things with him, and here Alice realizes at this time that the power of language has really an important role, in a sense that it connects people there and is the medium through which she can relate herself to that of others. Then Alice becomes queen later on, and a banquet was held for her in her honor. So during that banquet, she was always criticized by the other queens, for she, according to them, she has to go through this and through that in order to be actually deserving of that title. She has to go through an examination of some sort. She was continuously insulted even at the banquet. So as a result of her frustration, she gets one of the queens and actually shakes them so much, and then later on that queen then turns smaller and smaller, and is actually that time when Alice actually wakes up and realizes that it was just a dream or her imagination. All of it was. At the previous chapters, before she became queen, she was actually a pawn. So in this literary work, the motif of chess is very apparent, and Carroll actually followed strictly the rules and the motif of chess, in a sense that the landscape there is in the shape of a chessboard, and all the characters assumed a character in a game of chess, being the queen, the pawn, the knight. So Alice, being a pawn, only had limited amount of movement and line of vision, which made it quite difficult for her to move quickly.
So now, let us proceed to the analysis of significant symbols and images in the story Through the Looking Glass. So the first significant symbol in the story is the rushes. These rushes symbolizes the process of growing up, because in the story, while Alice was out paddling the river with a ship, she saw lava rushes in the water. So she cut these lava rushes, and while she gathered them, she hardly noticed that the rushes she caught begin to fade and lose its beauty from the moment she picked them. She didn't notice this because she was mesmerized by the beauty of the other lovely rushes, who are a bit too far from her reach. The rushes represents the bloom of purity and innocence in childhood, as well as the decline and lose when children reach maturity. Those rushes that quickly fading or quickly expires shows how quickly childhood passes, and how individuals cannot always recognize the ways in which they are rapidly growing and changing. So another symbol found in the story is the symbol of forest or wood. Alice encounters a wood many times as the story goes along. And so this wood symbolizes the danger and obstacles, a place of obstacles that Alice must traverse and overcome. Because when Alice first approached into the wood, she feels doubtful and afraid. But when she's already inside the wood, she finds the best way to get out of it. Let us go then to an image found in the story, which is the Sleeping Red King, that portrays an image of a divine figure and also embodies the author's reflection on nature reality. According to the two characters in the story, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, they said that the Red King is a godlike being who is dreaming of Alice, and said to be that Alice is just a character of the Red King's dream, and so her adventures in the Looking Glass world is just a creation of the Sleeping Red King's dream. As the Sleeping Red King portrays an image of a divine figure, it fostering the idea that everything exists in the real world, our world, are all because of our God's imagination. Another significant symbol in the story is Alice's crown. The heavy crown of Alice when she have reached the 8th square is the best symbol of Alice reaching adulthood, or the symbolism of an adulthood alone. When Alice discovers a large crown upon her head, which predicts that she's now become queen and also implies that she has reached her adulthood, she feels like the crown is kinda big for her head, it's kinda heavy, and something that she has to get used to. The crown suggests that being an adult isn't as great as it might seem at first. And also it suggests that you can still be lost in the world, although you have already reached your adulthood.
Through the Looking Glass revolves around 6 themes. First is alienation. Isolation is a powerful theme in Alice's journey in the Looking Glass world. When she enters there, she was the only one of her kind, and her only companions are her kittens, to whom she attributes human qualities to keep her company. From there, she seeks compassion and understanding from every individual she meets but was disappointed. Second is adulthood. When we think of adult or adulthood, we automatically associate the term with maturity, and when we say maturity, it implies our capability to distinguish what is right from wrong, our ability to adapt and change to certain circumstances if necessary, and embracing and accepting bigger responsibilities. So, adulthood through the Looking Glass is little different from childhood. The stakes may be higher, and there are certainly privileges that come with being an adult in the eyes of the society, but everyone is still just trying to figure out how to navigate the world. With this, Carroll suggests that adulthood really isn't that noble of a goal. It's just as confusing as childhood, and it doesn't provide any real benefits aside from simply getting to call oneself an adult. Third is dreaming. The author sets this entire book in the context of a dream. So Alice's dreams deal with anxieties of growing up and becoming a young woman. So what makes this significant is that the absence of reality does not matter. So the nonchalance about the issue of what is real and what is not shapes Alice as a compelling protagonist. So fourth is moral choice or social etiquette. Through the Looking Glass is framed as a chess game. So while framing the novel as a chess might suggest that the Looking Glass world is built on a similar foundation of rules and etiquette. So other rules seem similarly arbitrary, are short-lived, or are very uncomfortable for Alice. In this way, the novel takes issue with the rules governing society as a whole and reminds the readers that the rules of the real world are in many cases just as silly as those in the work of the looking glass world. So fifth is reflection or reversal. So mirror is often associated with the term reflection. So in the story, it means the opposite of what is normal or expected. So the most apparent example of this theme is the looking glass itself, so which provides a reflection of the actual world for Alice to explore, since within the looking glass, everything is backward. So lastly is satire. In this story, Carroll appears to be poking fun at adult intellectualism. What makes this more satirical is that all the characters who attempt logical debate either argue themselves into confusion or lose to a 7-year-old Alice.